Don't let Grandma near the documents. I wasn't supposed to hear that, but I did. The words came through the darkness like a knife slipped between ribs. My own daughter's voice, sharp and calculated, cutting through the silence of my kitchen at 2:47 in the morning. Don't let Grandma near the documents. I mean it. She reads everything. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand still reaching for a light switch I would never turn on. My throat was dry. I'd only come down for a glass of water. But what I found instead was the truth about my own children. My name is Ruth Holloway. I'm 75 years old, and I spent 30 years working as a hospice nurse. That's 3 decades of watching people die. 3 decades of watching families fall apart at the worst possible moment. 3 decades of seeing what inheritance does to people who thought they loved each other. I've seen sons steal jewelry off their dying mother's fingers. I've watched siblings throw punches in hospital rooms over who gets the house. I've held the hands of elderly patients while their children argued in the hallway about power of attorney, their voices carrying through thin walls while their mother took her last breaths. I thought I'd seen every ugly thing a family could do. I was wrong. That night, February 14th, ironically enough, Valentine's Day, I learned that the ugliest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you raised, the people you sacrificed for, the people who are supposed to love you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment I realized that my children had stopped seeing me as their mother and started seeing me as a problem to be solved. The glow from the laptop screen illuminated 3 faces in my dark kitchen. My daughter Karen sat at the head of the table, her reading glasses perched on her nose, scrolling through something on her computer. My son-in-law Mark leaned over her shoulder, pointing at the screen. And on FaceTime, propped up against the fruit bowl, was my son David, calling from California, where he'd been living for the past 15 years. David, who hadn't visited me in 6 years. David, who didn't come when his father Harold died. David, who couldn't make it to the funeral because of work commitments. But here he was, at nearly 3 a.m, wide awake and engaged in conversation about what exactly? I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. My old knees ached from standing still, but I didn't dare move. I didn't dare make a sound. The house alone is worth $890,000, Mark was saying. His voice had that eager quality I'd never trusted. If we can get her to sign the quitclaim deed before she realizes what it is, we can transfer the title into our names. Then we control what happens next. Karen nodded slowly. She's still sharp enough to cause problems, but that won't last forever. We need to move while she can still sign her own name. My hand went to my chest. My heart was pounding so hard, I was certain they would hear it. What about the stocks? David's voice crackled through the phone speaker. Dad had those blue chip shares he bought in the 80s. IBM, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson. Those have to be worth a fortune by now. We can't find any of the paperwork, Karen said, frustration edging into her tone. We've looked everywhere. Dad must have hidden it all. You know how paranoid he was. Mom has to know where everything is, David replied. She's just playing dumb. Playing dumb. My son thought I was playing dumb. I thought about all the times I'd held David as a baby, all the nights I'd stayed up with him when he had croup, all the money Harold and I had sent him over the years when his business ventures failed. I thought about the college tuition we'd paid, the wedding we'd funded, the down payment we'd helped with on his first house, the one he'd lost in his divorce. And now He thought I was playing dumb. Don't let Grandma near the documents. Karen's voice dropped lower, more serious. I mean it. She reads everything. Remember when she asked all those questions about the trust Dad tried to set up? She's not as confused as she lets on. Mark laughed softly. She's 75, Karen. How much longer can she really keep track of everything? I felt something cold settle into my bones. Not hurt, not anymore. Something harder. Something that had been forged in 30 years of watching families destroy themselves over money. They thought I was weak. They thought I was confused. They thought I was an obstacle to be managed, a signature to be obtained, a problem that would solve itself if they just waited long enough. They had no idea. Harold, my husband of 47 years, had been what some people called paranoid. He'd spent his entire career working in banking, and he'd seen too much. He'd watched colleagues get swindled by their own children. He'd processed estate settlements where nothing went to the people it was supposed to go to. He'd learned over decades that when money was involved, you couldn't trust anyone, not even family, especially not family. So Harold had prepared. Everything, every stock certificate, every deed, every insurance policy, every account statement was locked in a safety deposit box at Maplewood County Federal Credit Union. That's 45 minutes away in a completely different county. The box was registered under a trust name that didn't include our family surname. Only I had the key. Only I knew which bank. Only I knew the trust name. The children had been searching for years. They'd gone through Harold's office after he died. They'd checked every drawer, every file cabinet, every shoebox in the closet. They'd found nothing because there was nothing to find. Harold's paranoia, which I'd sometimes found exhausting during our marriage, was about to become my greatest weapon. I stood in that dark hallway for another 20 minutes, listening. They discussed timelines. They discussed strategies. They discussed how to handle Mom. Karen's words, not mine. They talked about me like I was a difficult project at work, something to be managed and manipulated until it produced the desired result. When they finally ended the call and Karen closed her laptop, I slipped back to my bedroom on silent feet. I'd spent decades moving quietly through hospice wards at night, checking on sleeping patients without waking them. I knew how to be invisible when I needed to be. I lay in bed until dawn, staring at the ceiling, planning. The next morning, I shuffled into the kitchen at my usual time, wearing my usual robe, making my usual pot of coffee. Karen had stayed over. She'd been doing that more and more lately, claiming she wanted to help out around the house. Now I knew the real reason. "Morning, Mom," she said brightly. "Sleep okay?" "Oh, you know how it is," I said, playing my part perfectly. Up and down all night. Bladder's not what it used to be. Karen nodded sympathetically. "I brought muffins. Blueberry, your favorite." She set the basket on the table, and I noticed the manila folder underneath. My heart rate stayed steady. 30 years in hospice had taught me to keep my composure in impossible situations. "What's that?" I asked innocently, pointing at the folder. "Oh, this?" Karen pulled it out as if she'd just remembered it was there. "Just some paperwork from the insurance company. Nothing exciting. They need a few signatures to update their records." I reached for the folder. Inside were several documents, densely printed, full of legal language. Most people my age would have been intimidated. Most people my age would have trusted their daughter to explain what needed signing. But I wasn't most people. I'd spent 30 years reading medical charts, legal forms, DNR orders, power of attorney documents, and every kind of end-of-life paperwork imaginable. I could identify a quitclaim deed from 20 feet away, and there it was, buried in the middle of the stack. A quitclaim deed for my house, the house Harold and I had paid off in 1998, the house I'd lived in for 42 years, the house they wanted to steal from me. The print is so small, I said, squinting at the pages. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Could you read them to me, dear? Karen's face flickered with something, annoyance, concern, before settling back into that helpful daughter smile. It's really just routine stuff, Mom. Boring legal language. You don't need to worry about the details. Humor an old woman, I said. I like to know what I'm signing. Karen picked up the first page, a genuinely innocuous form from my supplemental insurance company. She read it aloud, her voice steady. I signed. She moved to the second page, another insurance form. I signed. Then she reached for the quitclaim deed. This one's just, she started. I knocked my coffee cup with my elbow. The mug tipped, sending hot liquid cascading across the table, soaking directly through the quitclaim deed. Oh no, I gasped, grabbing for napkins. Oh, I'm so clumsy. I'm so sorry, dear. Look what I've done. Karen snatched up the dripping papers, but it was too late. The quitclaim deed was soaked through, the ink bleeding, the document ruined. It's fine, Mom, Karen said through clenched teeth. I'll get another copy. Another copy of what? I asked, all wide-eyed innocence. The insurance form, she said quickly. Just another insurance form. I nodded, dabbing at the spilled coffee with trembling hands that weren't actually trembling at all. That was the moment I stopped being a victim. That was the moment I started fighting back. Over the following week, I paid close attention to things I'd previously dismissed. My granddaughter Megan, Karen's 22-year-old daughter, had been staying in the guest room while she figured out her next steps after college. I'd been happy for the company, but now I noticed how she always closed her laptop when I entered the room. Just work stuff, Grandma, she'd say, with a nervous smile. Really boring. You wouldn't be interested. I noticed how Karen always seemed to arrive right when important mail came, how Mark had started offering to help with the bills, something he'd never done in the 15 years he'd been married to my daughter, how David had started calling more frequently, his voice dripping with concern about my health and my stress levels. I noticed everything, and I started keeping a notebook. February 15th, Karen arrived at 10:47 a.m. with paperwork. Claimed it was from insurance company. Actual document, quit claim deed for house, destroyed via coffee spill. February 17th, Mark offered to organize my filing cabinet. Declined. He seemed frustrated. February 19th, David called to ask about Dad's old papers, claimed he wanted them for sentimental reasons. I told him I hadn't found anything yet. February 21st, Megan closed laptop quickly when I entered guest room. Screen briefly visible, spreadsheet with column headers including house value, stock estimates, and timeline. I filled pages, dates, times, quotes, observations, evidence, but evidence alone wouldn't protect me. I needed allies. I called Walter Morrison on February 23rd. Walter was 82 years old, a retired banker who'd worked with Harold for 20 years. They'd been close enough that Harold had trusted Walter with the truth about our safety deposit box. Ruth, Walter said when he answered. His voice was warm. It's been too long. How are you holding up? I need your help, Walter. I need you to recommend a lawyer. There was a pause. Walter was smart enough not to ask unnecessary questions. What kind of lawyer? The kind who specializes in protecting old people from their own families. Another pause. Then, I know exactly who you need. Her name is Patricia Okonkwo. She's the best elder law attorney in the state. She doesn't lose. I wrote down the name. Ruth, Walter added quietly. Whatever's happening, you're not alone. You understand. Harold would want me to tell you that. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. I hadn't cried since the night I heard my children planning to steal my home. Thank you, Walter, I said, for everything. Patricia Okonkwo's office was in Center City, Philadelphia, 40 minutes from my house. I told Karen I was going to a doctor's appointment. She offered to drive me. I declined, saying I needed the independence. Are you sure, Mom? The traffic can be... I've been driving for 55 years, I said firmly. I think I can manage a trip to the city. Karen's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Patricia's office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower overlooking Market Street. The waiting room was tastefully decorated with African art and leather furniture. I sat clutching my notebook, feeling out of place in my sensible shoes and cardigan. But when Patricia emerged to greet me, I felt an immediate sense of relief. She was in her 50s, tall and striking, with close-cropped gray hair and sharp eyes behind elegant glasses. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my first car, but her handshake was warm and her smile was genuine. Mrs. Holloway, she said, please, come in. Tell me everything. I did. For 2 hours, I sat in her office and laid out the entire situation, the overheard conversation, the quitclaim deed, the coordinated pressure from all three sides. Karen, Mark, and David. The laptop Megan kept closing. The questions about Harold's papers. The attempts to get me to sign documents without reading them. Patricia listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving in quick, precise strokes. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. Mrs. Holloway, what your daughter attempted with that quitclaim deed, that's fraud. Attempted theft. If she'd gotten your signature and filed that document, she could have transferred your home out from under you. I nodded. I'd suspected as much. But here's what concerns me more, Patricia continued. The coordination. The fact that your son in California, your daughter here, and your son-in-law are all working together suggests this isn't impulsive. This is planned, and planned financial exploitation of the elderly is a pattern crime. It escalates. What do you mean, escalates? Patricia leaned forward. If the quitclaim deed doesn't work, they'll try something else. Power of attorney, guardianship proceedings. They might try to have you declared incompetent so they can take control of your finances legally. My blood ran cold. Can they do that? They can try, and they often succeed because most elderly people don't have representation. They don't know their rights. They don't know that what's being done to them is illegal. She paused, letting that sink in. But you're not most elderly people, Mrs. Holloway. You came to me. You brought documentation. And you have something they don't know about. The safety deposit box. Exactly. Patricia's eyes gleamed. They can't steal what they can't find. And as long as you control those documents, you control your own destiny. I felt something shift in my chest. Hope, maybe, or determination. What do I do now? I asked. Patricia smiled. It was not a gentle smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent her career going to battle for people like me. Now, she said, we build your case, and then we make them regret ever underestimating you. Have you ever watched someone you trusted reveal their true nature? Have you ever realized that the people who claim to love you are really just waiting for you to die? Comment below and tell me, have you seen these patterns in your own family? Because I promise you, you're not alone. Patricia gave me homework. First, I was to continue keeping my notebook. Every conversation, every suspicious behavior, every attempt to get me to sign anything, dates and times, always. Second, I was to save every text message and email from my children. Patricia explained that electronic communications were often the most damning evidence in exploitation cases because people let their guard down when they think no one else is watching. Third, and this was crucial, I was to start recording. Pennsylvania is a two-party consent state, Patricia explained. That means you can't record a conversation unless everyone involved knows they're being recorded. But there's an exception for situations where you have reasonable suspicion that a crime is being committed. Given what you've already documented, I believe we can argue that exception applies. She helped me download a recording app on my phone, showed me how to start it discreetly, made me practice until I could do it without looking. Use it sparingly, she warned, only when you genuinely believe they're discussing the scheme. We want quality evidence, not quantity. I drove home with my head spinning, but for the first time since that night in the hallway, I didn't feel helpless. I felt armed. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered intelligence like a spy in my own home. I accidentally left my phone recording during Karen's visits. Most of what I captured was innocent. Discussions about grocery shopping, complaints about the weather, idle chat about Megan's job search. But occasionally, gold appeared. March 3rd. Karen, on phone with Mark, thinking I was napping in the living room. She signed the insurance forms, but made a mess of the deed. I'll have to get another one. Gerald says we need to move faster. Gerald, a name I didn't recognize. March 8th. Karen on FaceTime with David. My phone recording from my purse on the kitchen counter. Mom's been acting weird lately, asking questions about Dad's papers. I don't think she knows anything, but we should be careful. David's response. Has she mentioned a lawyer? No. Why would she have a lawyer? She doesn't even have a financial advisor. Everything's been in Dad's name forever. I smiled when I listened to that recording later. Let them underestimate me. March 12th, the most damning recording of all. Karen had cornered me in the kitchen, another stack of papers in her hand. Mom, I really need you to sign these today. The deadline is coming up. What deadline? I asked, fumbling with my phone in my cardigan pocket, starting the recording. For the estate planning. We discussed this, remember? We need to make sure everything is organized in case something happens to you. In case something happens to me? Karen's voice tightened. You're not getting any younger, Mom. We need to be prepared. Prepared for what? For, she hesitated, for when you can't make decisions for yourself anymore. I let the silence stretch, let her squirm. I make decisions for myself just fine, Karen. I know you think that, Mom, but sometimes people don't realize when they're starting to slip. It's gradual. That's why we need to set up power of attorney now, while you can still understand what you're signing. My hand tightened on my phone. She was calling me incompetent to my face while trying to trick me into signing over my rights. I think I'll have my own lawyer look at these first, I said calmly. Karen's face went pale. Your own lawyer. Since when do you have a lawyer? Since I decided I needed one. She recovered quickly, but I'd seen the panic flash across her features. That's great, Mom. That's really smart. Who is it? Maybe I know them. I don't think you do. I picked up the papers, tucked them into my cardigan pocket along with my phone, and walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Karen immediately dialing her phone. Mark, we have a problem. She has a lawyer. I kept walking. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them make mistakes. Patricia reviewed my recordings with growing concern. Gerald, she said, pointing to the name in the transcript. Gerald Webb. I know him. Who is he? Patricia's lip curled slightly. He's a lawyer, technically, but he specializes in a particular kind of case, helping families gain control of elderly relatives' assets. He's been sanctioned twice by the Bar Association for ethical violations, but somehow he keeps practicing. Karen hired him? It appears so, which tells me they're more organized than I initially thought. Patricia made a note. Gerald's involvement means they're not just winging this. They have a strategy. What kind of strategy? Patricia looked at me with something like pity. The most common approach is to file for guardianship. They'd claim you're mentally incapacitated, unable to manage your own affairs. If a court agrees, they'd be appointed as your guardians, with full control over your finances, your medical decisions, everything. My stomach dropped. Can they really do that? I'm not incapacitated. You know that. I know that. But these cases often come down to who tells the more convincing story. And Gerald Webb is very good at telling stories. She leaned forward. That's why we need to strike first. What do you mean? I mean we don't wait for them to make their move. We make ours. I thought about it for a long moment. 30 years of hospice work had taught me that timing was everything. You couldn't save a patient by acting too early or too late. You had to wait for exactly the right moment. What did you have in mind? I asked. Patricia smiled that sharp smile again. How do you feel about a family meeting? The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would invite everyone to a family discussion about planning for the future. Karen and David would assume this meant I was ready to sign over control. They'd arrive expecting victory. Instead, they'd walk into an ambush. But first, I needed to do something that broke my heart. I needed to contact Tyler. Tyler was David's son from his first marriage, my grandson, 23 years old, living in Pittsburgh. When David had divorced Tyler's mother 15 years ago, the custody battle had been brutal. David had won primary custody and promptly moved Tyler to California. I'd tried to stay in touch. I'd sent birthday cards, Christmas presents, letters. For the first few years, Tyler had responded. Then the responses stopped. David told me Tyler wasn't interested in the family anymore, that he was going through a phase, that he'd come around eventually. I'd believed him. I shouldn't have. Walter had helped me find Tyler's current contact information, an email address and phone number. I stared at them for 3 days before finally picking up the phone. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a young man's voice answered. Hello? Tyler, this is your grandmother, Ruth. Silence, long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Grandma Ruth? His voice cracked slightly. Dad said you didn't want to talk to me anymore. He said you were upset about the divorce, and you blame Mom, and you didn't want. That's not true. My own voice cracked. None of that is true. I've been trying to reach you for years. Your father told me you didn't want contact. Another silence. Then a sound that might have been a sob. Grandma, I thought you forgot about me. I thought you didn't care. I closed my eyes. Let the tears come. I'd held them in for weeks, but this was too much. I never forgot you, Tyler. Not for a single day. I still have every card you ever made me, every letter you ever wrote. I made you cards for years, Tyler said, his voice thick. I gave them to Dad to mail. He said you never responded. The knife twisted deeper. David had intercepted our correspondence. He deliberately severed the bond between grandmother and grandson. He told each of us that the other didn't care. Why? To isolate me. To make sure there was no one in my corner when it came time to claim the inheritance. It didn't matter why. What mattered was that Tyler was on the phone, and he was real, and he didn't hate me. Tyler, I said, wiping my eyes, I need to tell you some things about your father, about what's been happening, and then I need to ask you for help. I told Tyler everything, the late-night kitchen conversation, the quitclaim deed, the recordings, Gerald Webb, the planned guardianship filing, all of it. He listened in silence. When I finished, his voice was cold and hard. I always knew something was wrong with Dad. The way he talked about money, the way he treated Mom during the divorce. But this, he paused. This is criminal, Grandma. What they're doing to you is criminal. I know. That's why I have a lawyer. Good. But what can I do? How can I help? I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part. Tyler, I've changed my will. My attorney helped me set up a trust. And I've named you as the beneficiary. Dead silence. Grandma, I wasn't calling about money. I know you don't. That's exactly why you're the right person. I smiled through my tears. Your father and Karen have spent months trying to steal from me. They've lied to my face. They've tried to trick me. They've treated me like a problem to be solved. But you, Tyler, you've never asked me for anything. You've just called every Sunday, even when you thought I didn't want to hear from you. Even when your father told you I didn't care. I never believed him, Tyler said quietly. Not really. I always hoped he was wrong. He was wrong about a lot of things, but he was especially wrong about us. I told Tyler about the family meeting scheduled for Saturday. I told him that Patricia would be there. I told him that his father and aunt were about to learn that their scheme had failed. I want you there, Tyler. I want you to see who these people really are, and I want them to see who's getting everything they tried to steal. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll book my flight tonight. Telling everyone about the family meeting was an exercise in manipulation. I'd become quite good at it. I called Karen first. I've been thinking about what you said, I told her, letting my voice waver slightly, about planning for the future, about making sure everything is organized. That's great, Mom. That's great, Mom. Karen's voice brightened immediately. That's really smart. I thought we could have a family meeting, Saturday afternoon, to discuss everything. A family meeting? With you and Mark and David. We can go over all the paperwork together, make decisions as a family. The pause on the other end was heavy with anticipation. I could practically hear Karen calculating. I think that's a wonderful idea, Mom. I'll call David right away. I'm sure he'll want to be there. Even though it's short notice, he'll make it work. This is important. I smiled to myself. David hadn't visited me in 6 years, hadn't come to Harold's funeral, hadn't called on my birthday for the past 3 years. But for a family meeting about the paperwork, he'd be on the next flight. And he was. David landed at Philadelphia International on Thursday, 2 days before the meeting. He rented a car and drove straight to my house, arriving just after noon with flowers and a bottle of wine. "Mom!" He wrapped me in a hug that lasted slightly too long. "It's so good to see you. I'm sorry it's been so long. Work has been crazy." 6 years of crazy, I said mildly. David's smile flickered. "You know how it is. California's a long way away, but I'm here now. That's what matters, right?" I studied my son. He was 52, still handsome in that preppy way he'd cultivated since college, but there were new lines around his eyes, and his smile didn't quite reach them. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Of course. I wouldn't miss this for anything." That evening, David and Karen sat in my living room while Mark hovered in the background. They discussed Mom's plans with enthusiastic support for whatever I wanted. "We just want you to be comfortable," Karen said. "We want to make sure you're taken care of," David added. "Whatever you decide, we'll support you," Mark chimed in. They were putting on a show. I watched their performance with a clinical eye, noting every false note, every forced smile. At one point, Karen excused herself to use the bathroom. She was gone for 7 minutes. Far too long. When she came back, I noticed she'd been in the hallway closet, searching for documents, no doubt. She'd find nothing. There was nothing to find. Friday night, I couldn't sleep. I got up at midnight, intending to get a glass of water, for real this time, and heard voices in the kitchen again. History repeating itself. I didn't hide this time. I walked right in. David, Karen, and Mark all froze. Karen's phone was on the table, speaker on, and I caught a glimpse of Gerald Webb's name on the screen before she fumbled to end the call. "Mom!" Karen's voice was too bright. "We thought you were asleep." I was. Now I'm not. I moved to the cabinet, got my glass, filled it from the tap. "What are you all discussing at this hour?" "Just logistics for tomorrow." David said smoothly. "Who's bringing what?" "That kind of thing." I took a sip of water, looking at each of them in turn. "I suppose tomorrow is an important day." "It really is, Mom." Karen's smile was eager. "We're so glad you're ready to plan for the future." "I've been planning for the future for a long time," I said quietly. "Longer than you know." I walked out before they could respond. Behind me, I heard urgent whispers resume. Let them whisper. Let them plan. Let them think they were winning. By this time tomorrow, they'd know the truth. Saturday arrived. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. Patricia arrived at 2:30, letting herself in through the side door as we'd planned. She set up in the dining room, legal pad, laptop, folder of documents. She looked every inch the formidable attorney she was. At 2:45, the doorbell rang. Karen and Mark arrived first. Karen carried a tote bag full of papers, her own documents, I assumed, things she wanted me to sign. "Mom, this is so exciting," she said, kissing my cheek. "I'm really glad we're doing this." "Me too, dear." Mark shook my hand. "Good to see you, Ruth. Big day." Indeed. David arrived at 2:55, slightly out of breath. Traffic was a nightmare, but I made it. We gathered in the living room. I offered coffee, made small talk, let them settle in. At 3 o'clock exactly, I stood. "Before we begin," I said, "I'd like to introduce someone." Karen's smile froze. Introduce someone? Patricia walked in from the dining room. She was wearing a deep purple suit today, immaculate and commanding. Her presence seemed to fill the room. "Everyone, this is Patricia Okonkwo. She's my attorney." The silence was absolute. David was the first to recover. "Your attorney, Mom. We didn't know you had—" "I've had Patricia for the past 6 weeks," I said. "She's been advising me on everything." Karen shot a look at Mark. Mark stared at the floor. David's jaw had tightened. That's great, Mom," Karen managed. "It's good to have professional guidance." "I think so too." I gestured to the couch. "Please, sit down." They sat. Patricia remained standing, positioning herself near the fireplace where she could see everyone. "I called this meeting," I began, "because there are some things we need to discuss as a family. Some things I've discovered over the past several weeks." "Discovered?" David's voice was wary. I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out my notebook. February 14th, 2:47 a.m., kitchen, present, Karen, Mark, and David via FaceTime. I looked up at them. "That's the night I first heard you discussing my estate." Karen's face went white. "I came down for water. I heard voices. I listened. I turned a page." "Mark, you said the house was worth $890,000. You said if you could get me to sign the quit-claim deed before I realized what it was, you could transfer the title into your names." Mark made a strangled sound. "Karen, you said I was still sharp enough to cause problems, but that won't last forever. You said you needed to move while I could still sign my own name." Karen's hand flew to her mouth. "And David." I looked at my son. "You said, don't let Grandma near the documents. She reads everything." David had gone very still. "That's when I knew," I continued, my voice steady. "That's when I understood what you'd been planning." Patricia stepped forward. "Mrs. Holloway has documented everything that's happened since that night. 47 pages of notes, recordings of conversations made under the criminal activity exception to Pennsylvania's consent laws, and evidence of multiple attempted frauds." She opened her folder. "The quitclaim deed you tried to get your mother to sign, Mrs. Cheney." Patricia used Karen's married name deliberately. "Constitutes attempted fraud. If you had succeeded, it would have been theft." Karen started to cry. "I was just trying to protect Mom. You were trying to steal her house." Patricia cut her off. "And when that didn't work, you contacted Gerald Webb to explore guardianship proceedings." David's head snapped toward Karen. "Guardianship? Karen, you told me we weren't going that far. We didn't. Gerald said." "Gerald Webb is currently under investigation by the State Bar Association." Patricia continued. "If he's found to have participated in a scheme to defraud an elderly woman, he'll be disbarred." I watched my children unravel. David, who always prided himself on his composure, was sweating visibly. Karen had dissolved into tears. Mark hadn't moved since sitting down. "But that's not the only discovery I made," I said, pulling out my phone. "I recorded this conversation on March 12th. I pressed play. Karen's voice filled the room. "You're not getting any younger, Mom. We need to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" For when you can't make decisions for yourself anymore." The recording continued, every damning word preserved in digital clarity. When it ended, the silence was suffocating. "I also found emails between the three of you," I said quietly. "Planning documents on Megan's laptop." "Yes, Megan, I know about the spreadsheet with timeline in the header, text messages about moving fast and handling Mom." Everything is documented. Everything is preserved. Karen's tears had become sobs. Mom, please. I'm not finished. My voice was sharp enough to stop her cold. Do you know what I did for 30 years? I worked in hospice. I held people's hands while they died. I watched families fight over inheritances before the bodies were cold. I saw every ugly thing human beings can do to each other when money is involved. I looked at each of them in turn. I never thought I'd see it from my own children. The doorbell rang. Everyone turned toward the sound. That would be our last guest, Patricia said. I walked to the door and opened it. Tyler stood on the porch, 23 years old, tall like his father, but with his mother's kind eyes. He was carrying a small duffel bag and wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. When he saw me, his face crumpled. Grandma. I pulled him into a hug, held on tight. I'm so glad you came. We walked back into the living room together. David's face had gone the color of old ash. Tyler, his voice cracked. What are you doing here? Tyler looked at his father with an expression I recognized. I'd seen it on the faces of hospice families. The moment they finally understood that someone they loved had betrayed them. Grandma invited me, Tyler said. She told me everything. Everything? David's eyes darted between Tyler and me. What do you mean, everything? She told me about the quitclaim deed, the guardianship plan, the years of letters you intercepted, so I'd think she didn't want to talk to me. David's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. I have something to announce, I said. Everyone turned to me. Patricia helped me draft a new will, a new trust, a complete restructuring of my estate. Karen leaned forward, desperate hope flashing across her tear-streaked face. Maybe she thought I'd forgiven her. Maybe she thought the trust would still benefit them somehow. Everything goes to Tyler. The words dropped like stones into still water. The house to Tyler. The stocks Harold and I accumulated over 47 years to Tyler. The life insurance policy to Tyler. Every asset, every account, every piece of property I own. Karen made a sound like she'd been punched. Karen and David will each receive exactly $1. I kept my voice level. So they cannot claim they were forgotten. They were not forgotten. They were remembered, documented, and excluded with full knowledge of what they tried to do. David shot to his feet. Mom, you can't. I can. I have. It's done. Patricia stepped forward. The documents have already been filed. The trust is irrevocable. Mrs. Holloway is in full possession of her mental faculties, as documented by 3 independent physicians. Any attempt to challenge this arrangement in court will fail, and if Mr. Webb or anyone else pursues guardianship proceedings, they will be met with fraud charges. This isn't fair, Karen screamed. We're your children. He's the only one who never tried to steal from me. My voice finally cracked. He's the only one who called me every Sunday, even when he thought I didn't want to hear from him. He's the only one who showed up to help me after Harold's funeral. And yes, Tyler, I know about that. Tyler's eyes widened. You knew. I found out later. You drove 14 hours to help me clean out the house, but David told you I didn't want visitors, so you sat in a hotel for 2 days before driving home. Tyler nodded, his jaw tight. Meanwhile, I continued, David couldn't find time to attend his own father's funeral. Karen arrived late to the service and left early. And ever since, you've all been circling like vultures, waiting for me to die so you could pick over what's left. The room was silent. Even Karen's sobs had stopped. "I'm not dying," I said quietly. "Not yet. And when I do, it will be on my terms, not yours." Mark cleared his throat. "Ruth, I never meant—" "Don't!" I cut him off. "I know about the credit card debt, Mark. $47,000. I know you haven't had a job in 14 months. I know you've been paying for Megan's school somehow, and I suspect it involves money you've already extracted from Karen's future inheritance." Mark went pale. "And David," I turned to my son, "your tech startup failed. You owe investors $200,000. You've been living on borrowed time, and you thought I was your way out." David couldn't meet my eyes. "I have documentation of everything. If any of you attempts to challenge this will, contest the trust, or pursue legal action against me, that documentation will be shared with the appropriate authorities, including evidence of attempted fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy." Patricia handed each of them a folder. "Inside, you'll find copies of the recordings, the emails, and the relevant legal statutes," she said. "Consider this your formal notice that Mrs. Holloway is aware of your activities and has taken steps to protect herself." Karen opened her folder. Her face went gray as she read. "This isn't the family I raised," I said, and my voice finally broke. "I don't know where I went wrong. I don't know how you became people who could do this to your own mother, but I know one thing." I looked at Tyler, at his kind eyes, at his honest face. "I know the family I'm choosing. And it's not you." The meeting ended. Karen and Mark left without speaking. David tried to say something to Tyler, but Tyler walked away before he could finish. I walked them to the door because I was raised to be polite, even to people who tried to destroy me. "Mom," Karen said at the threshold. Her voice was small. "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I know you'll have to earn the right to ask that question, and you're a long way from earning anything." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked to her car. David lingered on the porch. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, David, it is." I closed the door. "What would you have done if you heard your children planning to steal everything from you? What would you have done if you realized the people you raised had become strangers?" Comment below. Tell me your story. I want to hear it. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. Patricia filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association about Gerald Webb. An investigation was opened. Webb's license was suspended pending review. David flew back to California 2 days after the meeting. He didn't say goodbye. He hasn't called since. Karen attempted reconciliation 3 times in the following months. Each time, I set the same conditions: full accountability for her actions, complete financial transparency, and no more lies. She hasn't been able to meet those conditions yet. Mark and Karen's marriage began to crack under the strain. I heard from Margaret, my neighbor, who'd become a close friend through all of this, that Mark had moved out in April. The credit card debt, it turned out, was even worse than I'd thought. Megan came to see me alone in late March. She knocked on my door on a Tuesday morning, and when I opened it, she was crying. "Grandma, I'm so sorry." I invited her in, made tea, let her talk. "I knew something was wrong," she admitted. "I knew my parents were planning something. That's why I kept closing my laptop. I didn't want you to see the spreadsheets, the emails, but I didn't. I didn't understand how bad it was until the meeting." "You didn't know about the quitclaim deed?" "No, I swear. I thought they were just organizing things, for when she trailed off, shamefaced. For when I died, she nodded miserably. I sipped my tea, considering. Megan, you're 22 years old. Your parents' actions are not your fault, but what you choose to do now, that's on you. What do you mean? I mean, you saw something wrong and you stayed silent. You helped with the spreadsheets. You closed the laptop to keep me from seeing. You were part of it, even if you didn't understand the full scope. Megan's tears fell harder. But you're young enough to choose who you want to become. You can be like your parents, scheming, dishonest, treating family as obstacles, or you can be different. I reached out and took her hand. I'm willing to give you a chance to be different, but you have to earn it. Megan squeezed my hand. How? You can start by being honest with me about everything, and by visiting because you want to, not because you're trying to get something. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I can do that. Then we'll see. It's been 8 months since that family meeting. Tyler visits every other weekend now. He transferred to a nursing program at Temple University. Inspired, he says, by hearing about my career. He's good with patience, has the right temperament, calm, compassionate, present. Harold would have loved him. Megan kept her word. She visits every few weeks just to talk. She started therapy, working through her parents' influence, learning to recognize manipulation. She's not there yet, but she's trying. Karen still calls occasionally. I keep the conversation short. She's working on meeting my conditions. I'm not holding my breath. David has gone silent. I hear through family channels that his startup debts caught up with him. He's working at a consulting firm now, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Oakland. The empire he thought he'd build from my money never materialized. And me? I'm still here, still in my house, still paying my own bills, making my own decisions, living my own life. Harold's safety deposit box remains locked away in Maplewood County. I go once a month to check on everything, to remind myself what I'm protecting and why. The drive is therapeutic. 45 minutes of quiet roads, green fields, the peace of knowing that what I've built is safe. Some nights I sit on the porch and watch the sunset, and I think about what Harold used to say. Ruth, you can't trust anyone with the things that matter, not even family, especially not family. I used to think he was paranoid. Now I know he was right, but I also know something Harold never fully understood. You can trust the right people. You just have to be very, very careful about who those people are. Tyler is one of them. Patricia is another. Walter, Margaret, people who've shown their character through actions, not words. The family I was born with tried to steal from me. The family I've chosen protects me. That's the difference. Let me tell you about one more moment, one that happened just last week, that reminded me why all of this mattered. Tyler came over for Sunday dinner. We've made it a tradition now. He cooks. He's become quite good at it. And I tell stories about his grandfather, about the early years of our marriage, about all the things David never thought to ask about. Last Sunday, while Tyler was chopping onions for his famous chicken cacciatore, he paused and looked at me. Grandma, can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. Do you ever regret it? The way things went down at the meeting? I thought about it, really considered the question. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. I regret that my children became people who could do what they did. I regret the years I lost with you because of your father's lies. But the meeting itself, no. I shook my head. Not for a second. Because here's what I've learned, Tyler. When people show you who they really are, you have to believe them. Your father and your aunt showed me exactly who they were that night in the kitchen. They showed me every time they pushed a document across the table without explaining it. They showed me every time they discussed handling me like I was a problem to be managed. Tyler nodded slowly, turning back to his onions. I spent 30 years in hospice, I continued. I watched families destroy themselves over inheritance. I always wondered how it happened, how love could turn to greed so quickly. Now I understand. It doesn't happen quickly. It happens slowly, over years, through small compromises and justified betrayals. By the time the person is dying, the family has already been dead for a long time. That's sad. It is, but it's also why I'm grateful. Grateful for you, for Patricia, for the chance to see the truth while I could still do something about it. I reached over and squeezed his arm. Not everyone gets that chance, Tyler. Most people in my position don't figure it out until it's too late. They sign the papers. They lose the house. They end up in facilities they never wanted, surrounded by strangers, while their children spend their inheritance. Tyler set down the knife. His eyes were wet. I won't let that happen to you, Grandma. Ever. I know you won't. That's why you're the one I trust. We finished making dinner together. Ate on the porch as the sun went down. Talked about his nursing classes, about a girl he'd started seeing, about his dreams for the future. Normal things, family things, the kind of evening I used to imagine having with Karen and David before I knew who they really were. This is what they tried to steal from me. Not just the house, not just the money, but these moments, this connection, this love that asks for nothing except presence. They almost succeeded, but almost doesn't count when you're playing for keeps. Margaret came over yesterday. She's 80 now, sharp as a tack, and she's become one of my closest friends since all of this happened. We sit on my porch most afternoons, drinking iced tea and watching the world go by. Ruth, she said, setting down her glass, I've been meaning to tell you something. What's that? My nephew called last week, the one I told you about, the one who tried to get power of attorney over me 3 years ago. I remembered. Margaret's story was similar to mine, except she'd caught on earlier. She'd never even made it to a family meeting. She'd simply changed her locks and her will and refused to see her nephew again. What did he want? He wanted to apologize. Margaret laughed, but there was no humor in it. He said he'd been going through a hard time, and he hadn't meant to pressure me. He asked if we could start fresh. What did you tell him? I told him that fresh starts require honesty, and he'd proven himself incapable of that. She picked up her iced tea again. I told him that if he truly wanted to rebuild trust, he could start by admitting exactly what he'd planned to do, in writing, notarized, so there would be a record. Did he agree? Margaret snorted. He hung up on me. There's your answer. Exactly. She looked at me with those sharp eyes. That's how you know the difference between genuine remorse and strategic repositioning. Genuine remorse accepts accountability. Strategic repositioning just wants access. I filed that away. It was good wisdom. Karen called again last week. I admitted. And she apologized, said she'd been influenced by Mark and David, said she never would have done any of it on her own. Margaret raised an eyebrow. But she did do it. She was the one in your kitchen. She was the one with the quitclaim deed. I know. I told her that. What did she say? She cried. said I was being unfair, said she was just trying to help. Margaret shook her head slowly. They always say that. Every person who's ever exploited an elderly relative claims they were just trying to help. It's the universal excuse. I know. That's why I didn't accept her apology. Good. Margaret reached over and patted my hand. You're stronger than you know, Ruth. Harold would be proud. I thought about Harold then, about his paranoia that had turned out to be preparation, about the safety deposit box he'd set up decades ago, never knowing it would save me, about all the ways he'd tried to protect me, even after death. He would have hated this, I said quietly, all of it, the betrayal, the conflict, the legal proceedings. He never wanted drama, but he prepared for it anyway. Yes, he did. I smiled slightly. That was Harold. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Smart man, the smartest man I ever knew. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the neighbor's cat stalk a butterfly across the lawn. Ruth, Margaret said eventually, have you thought about what happens next? What do you mean? I mean, you've won this battle. The will is changed. The trust is set up. Tyler is protected. But you're 75. What about 10 years from now? 20? It was a fair question. I'd thought about it a lot. Patricia and I have discussed it. There's a long-term care directive in place. If I ever do become incapacitated, genuinely incapacitated, not the fake incompetence Karen was trying to manufacture, Tyler has medical power of attorney. Patricia's firm will manage the financial aspects. Everything is structured so that no one person has complete control. And if Tyler turns out to be like his father, I shook my head. I've thought about that too. But here's the thing, Margaret. You can't protect against every possibility. At some point, you have to trust someone. The question is who? And you trust Tyler. I do, not because he's perfect, and not because family means anything automatic. I trust him because of how he's behaved, because he called every Sunday for years, even when he thought I didn't want to talk to him, because he drove 14 hours to help me, and then drove home without complaint when his father sent him away, because in 8 months of visiting, he's never once asked about the will or the money or the house. Actions, not words. Exactly, actions, not words. Margaret nodded slowly. That's the real lesson, isn't it? Not just for your situation, but for everyone. Watch what people do, not what they say. 30 years of hospice taught me that. People reveal themselves in crisis. They reveal themselves when there's something to be gained or lost. They reveal themselves when they think no one is watching. And your children revealed themselves. They did. And Tyler revealed himself too, in completely the opposite direction. I looked out at the afternoon sun, feeling something like peace settle over me. That's the silver lining in all of this ugliness. I lost 2 children, but I found a grandson, and he's worth more than everything they tried to steal. The phone rang that night around 9. I was reading in bed, a habit Harold and I had shared for decades. I checked the caller ID David. My finger hovered over the accept button. I hadn't spoken to him since the meeting. Part of me wanted to hear what he had to say. Part of me wanted closure. But I'd learned something important over these past months. You don't owe explanations to people who've betrayed you. You don't owe them your time, your energy, or your emotional labor. You especially don't owe them another chance to manipulate you. I let it go to voicemail. The message was brief. Mom, it's David. I'd like to talk when you're ready. If you're ever ready. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm trying to understand what happened, how we got here. Call me if you want. I deleted the message without saving it. Maybe he was sincere. Maybe he genuinely started reflecting on his actions. Or maybe this was another strategic repositioning, another attempt to worm his way back into my good graces and my will. I had no way of knowing. And honestly, I didn't need to know. Because here's what I've learned at 75 years old. After raising 2 children, burying a husband, and watching my family try to steal everything I'd worked for, forgiveness is not a requirement. Reconciliation is not an obligation. Some bridges, once burned, stay burned forever. And that's okay. That's more than okay. That's self-preservation. I turned off my phone and went back to my book. Outside, the spring peepers were singing their nighttime chorus. Inside, I was warm and safe and free. No one was going to take that from me. Not ever again. There's one more thing I need to share with you before I go. One more piece of this story that I haven't told anyone except Patricia and Tyler. 3 weeks after the family meeting, I drove out to Maplewood County, to the credit union, to Harold's safety deposit box. I hadn't been there since he died, hadn't been able to face it. But now, after everything that had happened, I needed to see what we'd been fighting over. I needed to understand what Harold had worked so hard to protect. The bank manager recognized me. She'd known Harold for 20 years. "Mrs. Holloway," she said warmly, "it's good to see you. I was so sorry to hear about Harold." "Thank you, Linda. I need to access the box." She led me down to the vault. I signed the logbook. She used her key. I used mine. The box slid out, longer and deeper than I'd remembered. "Take your time," Linda said. "I'll be upstairs if you need anything." I sat alone in the small private room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and opened the box. Inside were decades of our life together. The deed to the house, signed and notarized in 1982, stock certificates, IBM, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, just like David had mentioned. A life insurance policy worth $400,000 that no one else knew about. Bank account statements showing the savings we'd accumulated over 47 years of careful living. But there was more. A letter from Harold to me, written in his careful handwriting, dated 3 months before he died. "Ruth," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably going through my things. I hope you found this box. I hope you remembered where it was." My eyes blurred with tears. I kept reading. "I know you always thought I was paranoid, too careful, too suspicious, but I've seen too much, Ruth. Too many families torn apart by money. Too many wives left with nothing because they trusted the wrong people. I never wanted that for you, so I built this box. I kept everything here, away from prying eyes, where only you could find it. What's in this box is our life, Ruth. Everything we built together. Use it wisely. Trust the people who deserve trust. And don't let anyone, not even our children if it comes to that, take what belongs to you. I love you. I always loved you. And wherever I am now, I'm watching over you. Your paranoid husband, Harold." I sat in that vault and cried for a long time. Cried for the husband I'd lost. Cried for the children who'd betrayed me. Cried for the life that had changed so completely in ways I never could have predicted. But when I finally dried my eyes and looked at Harold's letter again, I also felt something else. Gratitude. Harold had known. Somehow, he'd known that this day might come, that I might need protection from the very people we'd raised. And he'd prepared for it, decades in advance, because that's who he was, a planner, a protector, a man who loved me enough to think 20 years ahead. I put everything back in the box, closed it carefully, slid it into its slot in the vault. The documents are still there, safe and sound. The trust Patricia helped me create draws on those assets, but the originals remain locked away in Maplewood County, exactly where Harold put them. Some things are worth protecting, some legacies are worth preserving, and some love, the real kind, the lasting kind, doesn't end with death. It just changes form. Harold couldn't be here to protect me in person, but his paranoia, his preparation, his careful accumulation of a lifetime's worth of security, that protected me just as surely as if he'd been standing beside me. That's what love looks like, in the end, not grand gestures or romantic speeches, just quiet, persistent, determined protection of the people you care about. I hope someone loves you like that, and I hope you're wise enough to recognize it when they do. One last thing. Last month, I ran into an old colleague from the hospital, Nancy Whitfield. We'd worked the hospice ward together for 15 years before she retired. We had coffee at a little cafe downtown, catching up on the years since we'd seen each other. At one point, Nancy leaned forward with a concerned expression. "Ruth, I heard rumors about your children, about some kind of family conflict." I wasn't surprised. In a community like ours, nothing stays secret for long. "It's true," I said simply. "They tried to steal from me. I stopped them." Nancy's eyes widened. "Oh, Ruth, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. I'm not anymore." She studied me across the table. "You seem different, stronger somehow." "I am stronger because I learned something important." "What's that?" I set down my coffee cup and looked at her directly. We spend our whole lives teaching our children to be independent, to think for themselves, to make their own decisions. But we never teach ourselves the same lesson. We give and give and give, and we forget that we're allowed to keep some things for ourselves. Nancy nodded slowly. What happened with my children forced me to finally put myself first, to say, "This is mine, and you can't have it," to draw a line and defend it. I smiled slightly. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and it was the best thing I've ever done. "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" I thought about the question, about Karen's tearful phone calls, about David's single voicemail, about the silence that had stretched across the months since the family meeting. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know it won't be on their terms. If they want to rebuild trust, they'll have to earn it. And earning trust takes years. It takes consistency. It takes proving through action, not words, that you've changed. And if they never do that, then they never do." I shrugged. "I've made my peace with that possibility. I have Tyler. I have Margaret. I have Patricia and Walter and a whole community of people who've shown me that family isn't just blood. Family is the people who show up, the people who protect you, the people who love you without conditions or hidden agendas." Nancy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Harold would be proud of you, Ruth. So proud." "I know," I said. That's one thing I've never doubted. If you're listening to this and wondering whether your family would ever do something like this to you, pay attention to the small things, the closed laptops, the questions about where Dad kept things, the papers they want you to sign without reading, the conversations that stop when you enter the room. Trust your instincts. They're telling you something. And if you're already in a situation like mine, if you've already realized The people who should love you are really just waiting for you to die. Know this, you're not alone. There are lawyers like Patricia who specialize in protecting people like us. There are resources, hotlines, organizations dedicated to elder advocacy. There is help if you know where to look. Don't let them make you feel confused. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. That's part of the game. They want you to think you're losing your mind, so you'll sign whatever they put in front of you. You're not losing your mind. You're seeing clearly, maybe for the first time. And what you see is the truth about people you thought you knew. It hurts. God knows it hurts. There are still nights I lie awake wondering where I went wrong, wondering how the children I raised became the people who could do this to me. But the hurt doesn't mean I'm weak. It means I'm human. And being human means protecting yourself, even from family, especially from family. Harold was right about that too. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." I guarded my heart. I guarded my home. I guarded the legacy Harold and I built over 47 years of marriage. And I'll keep guarding it until the day I die, on my terms, not theirs. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this touched something in you, if you recognize yourself or someone you love in these words, please share it. Subscribe, leave a comment, tell me where you're listening from. And if you're going through something similar, if you're lying awake at night, wondering whether your family really has your best interests at heart, trust what your gut is telling you. It's telling you the truth, even when the truth hurts, especially when the truth hurts, because one painful moment of clarity is better than a lifetime of being deceived by the people who should love you most. Guard your heart, guard your home, guard your legacy, and never, ever let them make you feel like you don't matter. You matter. Your instincts matter. Your life matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, not even family. God bless you, and thank you for listening. Stay vigilant. Stay strong. Stay protected. Ruth.